Hello, everyone. This is Liz. Welcome to Freebie Friday. And I was actually for the last time, I'm going to be live from my home. Starting next week, I'm going to be live from the library 5 days a week. But don't worry, I will still be here to give you film recommendations that you can find either online or at the library. Also, just an FYI, I do give book recommendations as well. And an even more important FYI, on August 10th, I am going to be hosting an hour-long film education program on the history of the summer blockbuster. So if you're interested, you can sign up at our website or just keep an eye out for our Zoom link. So let's get started for Freebie Friday. Again, there are places to watch movies for free online. You have to put up with ads, but how different is that from watching a movie on cable? So we're going to start with some stuff that's on Tubi TV, and I'm going to recommend a rarity for me, which is a sports movie called Coach Carter. It stars Samuel L. Jackson in a fairly, I mean, Samuel L. Jackson still gets roles where he gets to be a character, but this is one of the roles where he actually gets to act. He actually gets to inhabit a character and be someone other than the persona of Samuel L. Jackson. Which, I mean, he can be the persona of Samuel L. Jackson until the end of time. Samuel L. Jackson's awesome, but I really like him in this movie. It's about a coach who decides to put an emphasis on not only excellence in terms of being on the court, but excellence in the classroom. It's a fairly standard, coach coming in to help a bunch of students, but it's done well, and I think sometimes that can save a movie. And also, fun fact, because this movie was made exactly in the mid-aughts, Ashanti is in it, and I don't think that that could have happened if it was made like any other time. It's that for me makes it a very big time capsule movie. Moving on, a little seen movie, but I would definitely consider this a hidden gem, is Robot and Frank, starring Frank Langella. This came out, I believe, 2012. I actually really like Frank Langella. I know him more for some of the roles he's had in the past 15, 20 years or so. So I've actually started to go back and watch some of his older movies. It's very strange to realize that once upon a time, Frank Langella was kind of like a heartthrob. You learn something new every day. But Robot and Frank is a really sweet movie. It's about a retired bank robber who's pretty much confined to his home. He's older. He's not as mobile as he used to be. It's kind of a futuristic society. His son gets him a helper robot, and while he does kind of bond with the robot, he also realizes, hey, wait a minute, maybe this robot can help me rob banks again. I think it's a really fun movie, and again, it's one of those if you like sci-fi, but not extremely hard sci-fi, but more human stories set in a vaguely futuristic setting, I would highly recommend Robot and Frank. And third, I'm going to recommend Florence Foster Jenkins for two words, and that's Meryl Streep. And two more words with Hugh Grant. I really do like the rebirth of Hugh Grant's career, sort of. I'd well, I'd say since this, because for a while Hugh Grant was the rom-com guy with stuff like 9 Months, Mickey Blue Eyes, Four Weddings and a Funeral. But he's kind of transitioned into being a character actor, and that really started, I believe, with being in the Wachowski sisters' Cloud Atlas. And seeing him take roles where he's not just the lovable doofus in a rom-com is really interesting to watch. I mean, Meryl Streep is good as ever. I don't think she deserved an Oscar nom for this, but it's an entertaining enough movie if you don't know the story of Florence Foster Jenkins. This was a woman who fancied herself an opera singer, and she actually had kind of a small little following of people who would listen to her sing and have fun with it because she was so bad, although she didn't know how bad she was. And she tries to book Carnegie Hall, I think is the internet commentator ContraPoints called her. She is the original cringe content. But I do think both Grant and Streep put some humanity to this movie. It's not, again, I don't think it is Oscar caliber, but it is not a terrible way to spend 2 hours of your life. Up next on Crackle, if you are looking for a kids movie or if you want a little bit of a, nostalgia, Harriet the Spy is up. I remember that as being kind of a big deal because that was the first movie that Nickelodeon was going to make into a theatrical feature. And I had read the book, so it was, I think it was the first, no, had Matilda first, but it was kind of this idea of, ooh, a book I love is going to be a movie. I'm excited. And obviously, there's some stuff that gets updated because the movie takes place in the 90s. The book obviously does not, but I think they do an overall good job adapting it. And Michelle Trachtenberg, I think, is fantastic as Harriet. Also, good performance from Rosie O'Donnell. I think, between this and stuff like Now and Then, I think she actually wasn't that bad of an actress. That or she just picked her roles correctly. Um, Up next, it's Chaplin. So this stars Robert Downey Jr., and it's hard to believe that Robert Downey Jr. is anything other than Tony Stark now. He's been Tony Stark for over 10 years. But when he was just starting out, this was kind of past his tough turf, less than zero Brat Pack stuff in the 80s. So in the early 90s, he really was trying to assert himself and find himself as a performer and really show the world, I am a genuinely good actor. So he did a Charlie Chaplin biopic. I believe he got nominated for Best Actor for it. And I would say this is another hidden gem where I'm like, go back and watch this. I think this is really good. And you might get a little bit frustrated because Robert Downey Jr. hasn't been picking challenging movies lately. Doolittle, what is that? But you watch this and you're like, oh yeah, Robert Downey Jr. is a really talented performer. That's why Tony Stark has become such a character in cinema canon, because Robert Downey Jr. is a good actor. So if you want to see, I think, a great forgotten Robert Downey Jr. performance, I would watch Chaplin. And finally, to go a little bit more into the past in terms of classics, 1956 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers is on there. Kevin McCarthy. I think this movie is fantastic. I am on record, obviously, of thinking the 78 version is the best. I think it's certainly my favorite, and I think it expands on the idea on such a great and chilling way. Also, it has the best ending, although I gotta say, You're Next is right up there. Fun fact, if you watch the 1978 version, there is a callback to that line, and Kevin McCarthy does make a cameo. So on to Pluto TV, four great movies on there, and I would say, well, all but one I would say are hidden gems. So first is Attack the Block. This is by Joe Cornish, and it came out it got lumped in with the Cornetto trilogy. If you're not familiar with that term, that is the Edgar Wright, Nick Frost, Sean Pegg, or Simon Pegg stuff, like the Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, World's End. Joe Cornish did kind of work with Edgar Wright, and so it got kind of put into that field, but it is a very different movie than what Wright, Frost, and Pegg are doing with, say, a Shaun of the Dead and a Hot Fuzz. So it's an alien movie. It starts with these kids who are, poor kids. They're in the, I guess, the British version of what the projects are, and both the movie, and the movie tricks you into thinking these kids are no good. They actually rob a woman. They take her purse within the first 10 minutes, but they then find out, oh no, our flat is infested with aliens, and because we're poor, because we don't have a lot of money, and the police are just going to take their time getting here, so we have to defend ourselves. We have to defend our turf. It turns into a fantastic action movie. It's a great extraterrestrial movie. The alien design is great. They look like weird demonic puppies. Oh, more like dogs. I still wonder kind of what they did for creature effects. And this is the biggest bonus, John Boyega. This is his big debut role. So if you love Finn from Star Wars, this is the movie that kind of put him on the map. Up next, a movie that I recommended on Prime a couple of months ago, Saving Face, is directed by Alice Wu, and it's about a Chinese American woman, her traditional family, and her girlfriend, and it addresses homophobia in the Chinese American community and homophobia in a larger American society sense, because did take place in the early aughts. There was still some lingering stuff around there, and I think it's a really charming, fun little movie, and I would like more people to see it. Support women directors, guys. Up next, a movie a lot of people know and love, or at least they know and love the two stars, and that is Stir Crazy. So Gene Wilder, Richard Pryor. Obviously, you are going to get an amazingly funny movie, amazing comedic performances, and you are not wrong. I think this movie is great. It overall holds up. I think comedy ages quicker than a lot of other genres because what is funny and what isn't funny can change so so drastically versus what is sad, what is romantic. But a good comedy, even if it is a little dated, will endure because it's funny. That's why stuff like Airplane has endured. The early Mel Brooks movies have endured. Animal House endures, versus bad comedies just almost age instantly. So yeah, there's a reason Stir Crazy is still a classic, and I'm like, if you haven't seen it, watch it. It's hilarious. And my final movie for the day, I was so happy to see that this was streaming for free because this movie is amazing. It's not going to win any Oscars, but it is one of the most fun times I've ever had watching a movie, and it is Blind Fury, starring Rutger Hauer. So I first heard of this movie when I was listening to a podcast called We Hate Movies, which they really aren't that hateful, but they'll talk about movies kind of in an MST3K sense. They'll use them as a jumping off point for jokes or kind of poke fun at the movies. And they were talking about this movie, and one of the hosts said, "This is the closest I've really come to What Are We Doing Here? This movie's great." And they did agree. It's great, but it's also silly and great fodder for humor. So, what is it about? Well, it is about Rutger Hauer is a man who's blind, but he is also extremely skilled at fighting. And it's great. It's actually based on the Zatoichi, the Blind Swordsman, which is a very famous film series in Japan. So this is an Americanized version of it. Tim Matheson, speaking of Animal House, helped produce this movie because he is a huge Zatoichi fan. This movie is so much fun. It's so silly. But you know what? Silly is okay as long as it's entertaining. And this movie is just like 110% entertaining. It's like Hard Target for me, where I'm like, I know in my heart Hard Target is not a great movie, but am I entertained for the entire 90 minutes of that movie? You bet I am. And the same is true for Blind Fury, and I will be this enthusiastic whenever I find Hard Target streaming somewhere. I mean, it's not like I own it, but you all should see that one too. So hopefully you will check out one of these movies, and I will see you next week at the library. Have a good weekend.